this video might be long. I don't know. Because there is certain things I do want to talk about with this figure that are both good and bad. But before I go into the good and the bad, into the review section, I do want to say this. For anyone who's been collecting this line, we have waited a long time for this moment to finally have another Darkseid in this line. Not just any Darkseid, a comic version of Darkseid. Why it took this long, I don't know. I really don't know. You can say that there were too many Batmans being released. That could be it. Like the good old Todd Fodder has said. He said Batman sells 365 days a year. So, and Superman. Why it took this long and why now is interesting timing. And of all the designs, he went with a classic one. I don't know if this is what classic Darkseid looks like, because I never read the older, the comics where he originated from. I do know that this is supposed to be based off of, I believe, Jack Kirby's design of the character, because this is a very different Darkseid I've never seen before. He is menacing. I do like that face portrait. He does have a wired cape, as what they've been doing a lot recently with a lot of figures. But this is a figure that I think a lot of people have been wanting. I mean, this thing sold out like that, like a snap of a finger. I mean, I remember I placed this on pre-order on Mcfarlane's website the moment it went up in the car. I logged in on my phone just to do all the stuff just to secure an order, and it finally arrived. This arrived a while ago. I give it 2-3 weeks ago it arrived. There were 4 things I had pre-ordered, and they took their very slow time to get here, because there were probably delays with the shipments going on at the Mcfarlane warehouse. So, but he's here, and it's pretty cool. He's a really cool looking figure. You could say that he's very bland because there's not a lot of colors going on. But hey, for a comic Darkseid that's supposed to capture a certain look from a certain era of comics, this is still a really cool Darkseid figure. And it's taken this long to finally get one. I'm glad it's not a wacky, oddball variant version of the figure or of the character. But again, this has been a long time coming. And the first Darkseid, however, that we did get, I don't want to call him Darkseid because he only showed up in one panel. It's really weird. But for a while, this line did not have a Darkseid. As I said in my previous video, the Storytime video, which I think this will be also a Storytime video as well, because there's just a lot of things to talk about. Maybe not a whole lot. Todd went for designs that are just different, right? And there is this one particular figure, and yes, it is a Batman figure. Yeah, so if you've been collecting this line, you would know that there's a lot of Batmans, and this one is technically Batman. So our first ever Darkseid, quote unquote, that we did get in this line, because it is supposed to be, what if Batman was Darkseid? I don't know the context of why this exists. It is from the death metal comics. That's all I know. They call him the Dark Fodder. But this was the first time in this line where we got someone remotely related to a Darkseid. He's not as big as this figure. I think he's smaller in comparison, but yeah. So if you remember, the Darkseid, or not Darkseid, the death metal build wave, you would have this figure. So this was the build figure of that wave. And at the time when this came out, people were like, okay, that's cool. It's probably, I don't know if anyone said it was cool, Maybe some people did. I think it's cool. I don't know what people's actual opinions are on this figure. I don't know the context of it. All I know is that this appeared in one page in the comic, and that was it. There was nothing else to this. And he took that and just made a figure out of it. So this was the build figure. So this was the first Darkseid, quote unquote, that we got. And at this time, I remember, I hope we get a proper Darkseid. Like something like the Darkseid from the New 52. You know, anything that was just what Darkseid is supposed to be. Like a legitimate Darkseid. Fast forward to sometime in 2021, after the release of the Snyder Cut, we finally did get a Darkseid. And at the time, no other companies made figures for this Darkseid. It was Mcfarlane that was the first to produce figures for this version of Darkseid. And of course, you know which one I'm talking about. The Zack Snyder Darkseid. Now, this version is supposed to be him before he, I guess, gets the Omega Beam or whatever. In the movie, there's like this flashback where he goes to Earth trying to look for the anti-life equation or whatever. And he gets kicked off Earth because humanity and the gods team up together and all that stuff, blah, 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 right? All that crazy stuff. And this figure had two versions. So this was the base version that you could buy at any retail store. And then there was the Target exclusive version, which was the more sought after one that had the full armor. So it covered up the chest and everything. And that's technically supposed to be Darkseid. On the box, this is Darkseid. It's labeled as Darkseid, but in the context of like the character in the period that they're in, this is supposed to be his name that he had before he started calling him Darkseid, calling himself that name. I don't remember what his actual name is, but this was our first Darkseid figure. Let's just put it that. Our first one. And it's not a bad figure. I'll go into it. This will have its own review in the future. But for the longest time, this has been the Darkseid on, I think, most people's shelves. If they didn't have the Target exclusive one, it was this one, right? And also, while we're doing this video, this is the first figure that introduced the mega figure concept, as I brought up in a previous video. That point. So this figure and Steppenwolf were the first two mega figures. The idea of like these bigger figures. I don't know if this is a good comparison. I'm just gonna bring them in here. This is the Mcfarlane Buzz Lightyear. Yeah, so there you go. So you get to scale how big he is. So the mega figure concept was born with this Darkseid. And then now we fast forward to 2024 and we finally have a proper comic Darkseid. So I don't remember there being any other Darkseid figure except for the three that I showed. One of them you can't even call him Darkseid because I mean if you want to you could, but and then the other one technically is Darkseid, but in a different point of his life. And then now we have, you know, the Darkseid, the true Darkseid, the villain that preceded Thanos, if I remember correctly, in terms of who got created first. So before we go into anything else, now I'm going to jump into what this figure comes with. So, in box, this figure had a different head on. He had this head while he was in the package. So, let me zoom in. This is the Omega Beam, or it looks like he's charging his Omega Beam eye, which is really cool. This is a really cool head sculpt, and that just shows you what... this is what it looks like underneath when you peg it into him. And that is neat. He has two fist hands, as you can see on him. In the package, he had like a open hand or something, so like something like this, so you can swap hands. His hands are easy to swap off, which is cool. So he comes with that, and he comes with the pointing finger. Every time I see someone have a pointing finger, I always think they're doing the like I'm the number one sort of thing. So yeah, he has a pointing finger. So there's that. That's cool. And then now to move into the details section. So before I show his face, if you look at the paint on my copy, I don't know if that's supposed to be like that or it's just dirty factory stuff. I don't know. I mean, I don't have any problems with it, but you see all this gray plastic, all this texture. It's really basic. There's not really any sort of like crazy details going on with the paint, minus the fact that you can see a lot of his veins, like his muscles. And I'm gonna try to zoom out a little bit from, yeah, there we go. And then you have his like regular face, right? Which is just like the face that I rather use. So I like that. I like this more. And of course, this beautiful blue wired cape. Let me just zoom in on that so you can see all the texture work on this thing. Mine got a little bit of dirt on it. I don't, as I said, it could have been from the factory. So who knows what caused this. But you see all that nice texture. And then I think, let me try to show the face better by panning the camera upward. There we go. There we go. I've been figuring out how to use my phone camera. Hopefully I can transition to something better, but now the face looks better with the way it's zoomed in than how it looks when it's zoomed out. So, okay. Let me zoom back out. And I apologize for this. I'm trying to... So that's basically everything on this figure. There's not, I mean, the legs, I forgot to show the legs. It's pretty simple. Yeah, you're not, there's no, there's not a lot of details. I mean, it is based off a comic book design, so so if it's gonna look like it popped out of a comic, it's going to look simple, right? Especially something like this. So, oh, and also the, I guess the letter D on his chest that holds his cape. That has a little bit of like a chrome sort of paint on it, but it's not like the best type of paint. So that is all the details on this guy, right? There's nothing else going on here. But even then, still a really nice comic book figure. So now, this is where I want to get into the flaws of this figure, because there is no such thing as a perfect action figure. Every action figure has a flaw. This one has a flaw that makes me worry sometimes. So, prior to this figure coming out, there was another figure that came out, not with the DC Multiverse, but with Spawn, because Mcfarlane has his own Spawn line that are also 7-inch figures. This figure, at the time before he was released, when they showed him, he was cool. He has a lot of sculpting. He does lack a lot in paint, kind of like this figure. I don't want to say exactly, but, well, you'll see and you can be the judge. But I wanted to bring him in because this figure was an example where it felt rushed. It felt like they didn't put enough time to let it bake in the oven. I like to use as a image, like, I don't know if it's a metaphor or an imagery, but if they put in more time, it wouldn't feel this way. It wouldn't feel so, I don't know, like hollow, cheap feeling. Because I've seen other people review this figure back in the day when it came out, and I think everybody universally agreed that this figure just doesn't feel like it's not. It felt like it's not good, right? It just feels very rushed. So, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is because the flaw with this Darkseid figure is the fact that this Darkseid figure feels just like that. I remember when I got him out of the box and I popped that head off to swap for this head on, it was not hard. I didn't break anything. But the moment I put this head in, and now if I try to take it off, I'm kind of scared of taking it off, let alone use a hair dryer or something to like pop it off, right? It's because the plastic on this guy feels very brittle. His arms, like the way that the joints move, feel very brittle. Like, I don't know if brittle is the right word, but they feel very tight, and it feels like it could snap if I do one wrong thing. And I will show something funny later because this figure also has another flaw that captures this very similar pattern to something that happened with the previous Darkseid. Mainly on one arm, but this one is not on one arm. So the figure that I'm talking about, and I'm gonna, see, this is what happens when you have too many mega figures on the table, or two mega figures on the table, take up a lot of space, is Overt Kill. So Overt Kill is a pretty cool figure. I mean, he does lack a lot in paint. He does look cool aesthetically, but why did this guy get the criticism that he did? Is because this entire chest piece is hollow. Like, I don't know if my camera will pick up this audio. I don't know if that sounds right, but it's a very hollow piece of plastic inside the torso. There is no weight to it. There's nothing. Zero. Like, it's not like the Bane figure, the Bane Build-A-Figure that I reviewed in my second video, where that torso, you can tell, has a lot of plastic. It weighs a lot. It weighs more, and it allows the figure to just feel so nice because it's hefty. This figure feels very cheap, especially with the chest. The arms are the same thing too. It's like they feel so... Everything on this just feels like it didn't have time to be what it should have been. So, and this looseness on the waist too. Everything. There's a lot of problems with this figure. But nevertheless, I still like the way this figure is sculpted. And then this goes into another figure that also felt like it was rushed. It felt like it also should have benefited from more plastic, but again, uses this similar pattern of has a hollow torso, but this time the legs and the arms, like Overt Kill, are the only things that have weight to it. And for those who have this wave, because everybody wanted this figure, because we've never gotten this figure in the DC Multiverse line, I'm talking about none other than the Arkham City version of Solomon Grundy. Same problem. It feels very cheap, right? It feels... This chest is very hollow. It's the arms and the legs that give this figure any sort of weight. If you remove those, there's no weight to this figure. And this is another example of why did this come out this way. If you know people are going to buy this wave, you should have produced it better. You can say that there's too many figures being pumped out quickly. That is another problem, right? Because in this line, if you've been collecting it as long as I have, you would notice that they always have new figures constantly being released relatively pretty quickly. Like, there is a time where they don't come out right away, but usually the windows for when the next batch of new figures get announced and when they are released isn't that far off from each other. Like, it's just like 1 or 2 months or 3 months until they come out, right? So, for example, it was like sometime in July that they announced the collector's edition with the Red Hood, Ragman, and Clock King, and those are scheduled to come out around September. So we're already in August, so sometime next month those will come out. I don't know if it's because of the pipeline of when these figures are announced, because this Darkseid was a surprise announcement, because prior to this, nobody knew we were getting a Darkseid, or maybe there was a listing and I just don't remember, but when he was shown at some sort of like Phoenix convention, I don't know what that convention was. I was pretty happy about this, but and I still am. I'm still happy about having this figure. I'm not going to be a completely negative, but at the same time, I do want to have a bit of fair criticism where you can be happy about having something, but you can also be disappointed when that product feels like it just wasn't given the care that it was given, like some of the other figures that were released in the similar time span that this came out. So, and this leads me to the articulation section. I will not try to do anything to the articulation in this video that if I feel like it won't move, I'm not going to force it, because this is how this figure feels to me. It really feels like it is fragile. It feels like if I try to do or force this articulation to move, I'm going to break something. And I don't want to break this because this is not a cheap figure. Mega figures all retail for $40, right? So knowing that these flaws exist, I'm only going to do what I can in the basic way. And for starters, his arms can move, right? So these can go in and out, simple, easy. Now, his arm, very tight joint, so you want to be very careful with that. His hands, they're quite loose, right? They're quite loose. So you can easily pop these off, and you can put, one of these other hands on there. So if you want to put the pointing finger on there, there you go. Now you can get Darkseid to look like he's pointing at you, right? So this joint has rotation, right? Like I said, single jointed arms tend to have a sort of rotation cut right here. Because it's so tight, because I haven't heated this up, and I'm scared that if I heat it up, it can also maybe damage it. There's like a fear that I have right now, and I should have this fear. I'm not going to rotate this arm, but yeah, you can see a little bit of it. It moves, so there's rotation right there, right? It's the same thing with this arm. So if you want to rotate this or move it up, you can. And one other thing that I noticed on my copy, I don't know if it's the same on anyone else's. So I'm going to zoom in. You notice that little crack right there? Do you see that? So I don't know if I caused that, but I don't think I did, because I went back into a photo I took of this guy in the box. That was already there. So that could have been like a factory QC problem for all I know. So there's that. Just wanted to point that out. Oh, and would you look at this? We just showed what I was going to bring up. His arms. Yes. His arms like to pop off. And I can actually show the arms articulation even better now. So yeah, same thing on this arm. It does the same thing. This is even more stiff on this side. You can pop these hands off. It can hinge. It can rotate. But this figure, to show you how this is how somewhat mad that I... Not mad. Somewhat a little bit pissed off I am with this figure is the problems it has, right? The arm popping off is very ironic because this is very reminiscent of what happened with the original Snyder Cut Darkseid. And this is where we bring that Darkseid back into the video, because I want to show this because I have him. Now, one of the running QC problems with this Darkseid back in the day, it wasn't just this one, it was also the Target exclusive one because they shared the same body. It was his arm. I think I can still pop his arm off. I used a lot of super glue back in the day to kind of like do that glue trick thing to kind of make it stay. But nope. Oh, there we go. Every Darkseid figure that came out with this line or with this particular version, the arm popped off easily. This is the running QC problem that wasn't just on Darkseid. This was happening with a lot of figures at the time. And this was one of those quality control issues that were just happening. Also, you have to remember, this was relatively like during COVID. So I'm not going to fault these kind of QC problems. Because, you know, we were living in a pandemic. We're coming out of the pandemic slowly. I mean, if you guys remember all that, but the point is, it's very reminiscent of the arm problem. So this Darkseid had the arm QC, right? And then now the new Darkseid, I don't know what happened here, but they might have sculpted the ball joint very small. I mean, it's not like it's broken. You can just peg it back in to his, torso. But it's the same thing with this arm too. I think if I do it correctly, hold up. I don't know. Last time I popped it off. Oh, there we go. Yep. So both his arms just come off. They both just pop off. And now you can have an armless Darkseid. This is like... I mean, from a positive... Here's the positive standpoint, okay? I'm not trying to be negative in this video. I don't want to be, because I really do like this figure. So, if you want to be creative and just imagine, taking these off, right? You could say like, oh, now, you could make up a scenario where maybe during the photography phase, you could do a lot of photoshopping and editing, but you can make it look good where it's like, what if Superman lasered his arm off or something, like, because he's tired of Darkseid's crap now. So it's like, I'm going to freaking put an end to you. So in a positive light, you could do that. Right? So with his arms popping off, and this is really hilarious because it's like, wow, his arms came off. So this is one of those situations where it is funny, but it is also very sad because this is not what a figure should have to suffer from, right? In terms of quality, especially something that is not cheap, right? $40. I don't think anybody wants a $40 figure with this kind of problem. Even though you can pop the arm off it and pop it back on easily and it won't come off. I mean, that's the only bright side is that these, when they pop back in, they will stay on, right? Compared to, bringing him back. Compared to this, where if you just swivel it for like a couple times, it's like, boom, the arm's gone. The arm has come off. So, I will fix this because I know how to. There's a way to do it now. But we'll talk about this guy in the future. That'll be a different video. But as for this video, talking about this very recent release as well, because he came out, not that long ago. I mean, it's still pretty hard to get this guy right now. He's sold out everywhere still. But the fact that there is this problem with him, I want this to be known. I want people to be aware of this, that if you buy this figure, understand that there are flaws with this figure. It is not completely flawless, right? Sometimes there are figures that come out where it's like, oh, that's pretty good, right? So, okay, now that his arms are not on here, we can talk about the legs. Now, for my figure, the legs do not want to do the splits, right? This piece is very thick. It's not like your usual soft PVC type of deal that exists on most figures. So you're not going to do the splits with this guy. You're not going to... You can rotate his legs a little bit. Like, there's a little bit of thigh swivel, upper thigh swivel. His legs can do the double joint. Now, mine are very stiff, so I am kind of scared. Oh, there we go. Let's do this leg. I'm very scared of, I'm not going to go all the way with this, okay? I'm very scared of breaking this thing. it just feels very fragile right now. Okay, but it can do the double joint if you heat it up, and I might heat this guy up mainly in his legs, not the arms. Now for his feet, this side is looser, so we use this. It can go this way. It can rotate, and then he also has the good old what? Okay, that side doesn't want to. There we go. There, yeah. The toe articulation. All right, let's. So that is the legs, and that is another problem that I want to address. The legs are very restricted. So, and this also reminds me a little bit of a recent figure that we got that had the same issue. So, the steel figure also has this problem where his legs won't kick out. Excuse me. I don't know why Mcfarlane decided to sculpt the waist piece so tightly. I don't know why they decided to do it this way. It hinders him from really having any leg movement at all. Like, I'm talking about this figure and also the other figure, which I will make a video on. But for now, it's the same problem. It's the same issue. Same thing. And that is also another problem that's on here. So, am I telling you not to get this figure if you actually want this figure? No. No. It's still a good figure. It's still worth it if you can get your hands on one. Because it still has this very nice sculpt to it where it just looks good. It's intimidating. Well, let me put these arms back on. Right? So, it's a very cool figure. And regardless of these flaws, I still think it's worth the pickup. However, I'm bringing up these flaws because I want people to be aware that, hey, if you're going to buy this figure, understand that you have to accept these flaws. You're not going to get him into any crazy poses unless you know how to modify him. Now, if you know how to modify him and fix a lot of these problems, that's cool. You can definitely get him to do all the crazy poses you want. But honestly, Darkseid isn't someone that really poses, right? I mean, you're not going to... You kind of want him to do his usual pose where he stands and look like he's about to shoot someone with an Omega Beam, right? So that's the common pose. However, I don't even know this figure. But the problem is you can't even you can do that, but again, because this piece is so restrictive, you can't even put his legs together. They can't even you can't get him into that stance, that classic Darkseid stance. So I mean, this stance is still pretty good, so I'm not gonna fault it. It still looks good. It still looks amazing, and honestly, this is still one of the coolest figures that have came out this year. In terms of something that I think most people, including myself, have been very excited for. And I've brought up these flaws to point them out because I hope going forward, I really do, and I hope more people realize this, we have to point this out. We have to point out these problems. We have to, hope that people don't like these type of issues on a mega figure, that it shouldn't feel this way, right? If you're going to charge more, it should feel solid. So with that, I think I got another phone call. Of course, I get a phone call right during this, right near the end. Okay, my point is, I hope that if you like this figure for what it is, you can also point out that yes, it is filled with flaws, and they shouldn't release things in this manner, because it really does feel like it's been rushed out of the gate, and there wasn't any treatment to it at all. Like, they didn't put time into it. I'm not gonna say they didn't, but they still put time into something, but I feel that it just needed more time in the pipeline, where this could have been released maybe a month or two later, and it would have felt solid if there was weight to it. So that is my opinion on this figure. If you have a different opinion, I'm all ears to hear it. As I've said before, I want people to realize or to remember that we all have our own opinions to what we like and what we don't like about a figure. These are my opinions, and in the end of the day, I hope we can all discuss about it and just, just talk it out and just what's the right word? And not get mad at it. Like that's basically it, because there's no point of getting mad at this. I respect everybody's opinion. So if you find this okay, you don't have any issues with this, cool, because we are all entitled to our own opinions, right? So agree and disagree. That is how things are. So with that, I'm going to now end this video. Hopefully that part where I got called, the random phone call, did not cut off the audio. If it did, that would suck. I'll see you next time in the next video. In the next video, we will be reviewing something that harbors back to something that I really love in this line. And it introduces another set of things that I think most people, like myself, never expected to ever happen in a line for these type of figures. So until then, have a good day, and yeah, I'll see you next time.